The Italian Mafia built an empire in America that lasted for decades. 5 powerful families, untouchable, feared, and completely white. But there was one man in Harlem who did something no other black man in history had ever done. He made the Mafia sit at his table, look him in the eye, and deal with him as an equal. His name was Ellsworth Raymond Johnson, but the streets called him Bumpy. And everything you think you know about him is only half the story. What the Mafia never wanted you to know is that Bumpy Johnson wasn't just a gangster. He was the one man in America who broke their monopoly on power, and they had no choice but to let him. Bumpy Johnson was born in Charleston, South Carolina in 1905, not in the streets of Harlem like most people assume. He got his nickname from a bump on the back of his head. His family sent him to Harlem in 1919 after his older brother was accused of killing a white man, and they feared a lynch mob would come for them. So young Bumpy arrived in Harlem as a teenager, dropped out of high school, and within a few years, he was running with the wrong crowd. But here's the first thing the Mafia never wanted you to know. Bumpy wasn't just some street thug. He was an intellectual. He read philosophy. He wrote poetry that actually got published in Harlem magazines, and he was known on the streets as the Professor. While other gangsters relied on guns, Bumpy relied on his mind. He was a chess player, literally and figuratively. And that chess-playing mind would eventually become the Mafia's biggest problem. In the 1930s, Bumpy became the top enforcer for a woman named Stephanie St. Clair, the queen of Harlem's numbers racket. Yes, you heard that right. His boss was a woman. St. Clair was brilliant, powerful, and she was being squeezed by a brutal mobster named Dutch Schultz, a German Jewish gangster who wanted to take over Harlem's underground economy entirely. Schultz had the backing of the Italian Mafia, unlimited money, and an army of killers. St. Clair had Bumpy Johnson. And what Bumpy did next became legend. He waged a guerrilla war against Schultz and his men, picking them off one by one on the streets of Harlem. The war claimed more than 40 lives and included multiple kidnappings. Bumpy was so ruthless that in one street fight, he stabbed a rival named Ulysses Rollins 36 times with a switchblade. 36. And then, according to witnesses, he calmly announced he had a craving for spaghetti and meatballs. That's the kind of man we're talking about. Eventually, Schultz was killed on orders from Lucky Luciano, the most powerful mafia boss in America. And here's where the story takes a turn that the Mafia never wanted the public to understand. When Schultz was gone, Lucky Luciano didn't send his killers into Harlem to wipe Bumpy out. Instead, he invited Bumpy to the table. They made a deal. Harlem's operations would remain independent from the Italian mob as long as a cut of the profits flowed upward. For the first time in American history, a black crime boss had forced the Mafia to recognize him as a partner, not a subordinate. And the most remarkable part? After that deal, Bumpy and Lucky Luciano became personal friends. They would meet regularly to play chess, sometimes right in front of the YMCA on 135th Street, in full view of Harlem. 2 of the most powerful criminals in America, sitting across from each other like old men in a park, moving pieces on a board. But the secrets don't stop there. In 1952, at the height of his power, Bumpy was sentenced to 15 years in prison for heroin conspiracy. He was sent to the most feared prison in America, Alcatraz. Alcatraz was supposed to be unescapable. The rock in the middle of San Francisco Bay, surrounded by freezing water and crushing currents. But in June 1962, something impossible happened. 3 inmates, Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers, vanished from Alcatraz in the only successful escape in the prison's history. And here's the twist the Mafia and the government never wanted you to dig into. Bumpy Johnson was inside Alcatraz when that escape happened. According to reports on Unsolved Mysteries, Bumpy used his outside mob connections to arrange a boat to pick the escapees up from the bay and drop them at Pier 13 in San Francisco's Hunters Point district. Was it true? It was never proven. But the fact that a black gangster from Harlem, sitting inside the most secure prison in America, could allegedly orchestrate the most famous prison escape in history, that tells you exactly how powerful Bumpy Johnson's network really was. When Bumpy was released on parole in 1963, Harlem didn't treat him like a convict. They treated him like a king. There was a literal parade waiting for him when he came home. The Godfather was back. And in the final years of his life, Bumpy did something that no other crime boss of his era would dare to do. In December 1965, he walked into a Harlem police station, sat down, and refused to leave, staging a one-man sit-down protest against police surveillance of black neighborhoods. A mob boss, protesting police brutality. That's not something you read about in the history books. He was charged with refusal to leave a police station, but a judge acquitted him. Even the courts couldn't hold him. And then there's the connection that historians still argue about today. Bumpy Johnson was friends with Malcolm X. Not casually. Their friendship went back to the 1940s, when Malcolm was still a street hustler known as Detroit Red. When Malcolm X broke away from the Nation of Islam in 1964, putting a target on his own back, it was Bumpy Johnson who provided him with protection. A gangster guarding a civil rights leader. The lines between criminal and revolutionary blurred in ways America was never comfortable acknowledging. Bumpy was also close friends with Billie Holiday and Sugar Ray Robinson. He was a fixture of the Harlem Renaissance, a man who moved between the underworld and the cultural elite with effortless grace. Now here's the final secret, the one that proves Bumpy Johnson was untouchable to the very end. Most crime bosses of that era died in a hail of bullets, betrayed by their own men or gunned down by rivals. Not Bumpy. On July 7, 1968, at the age of 62, Bumpy Johnson walked into Wells Restaurant in Harlem around 2 in the morning. The waitress served him coffee, a chicken leg, and hominy grits. He took one bite, clutched his chest, and collapsed. A heart attack. He died in the arms of his closest friend, Junie Bird, right there in the restaurant. No bullets, no betrayal, no dramatic last stand. The Godfather of Harlem just sat down for breakfast and never got up. He was under a federal indictment for drug conspiracy at the time of his death, and even the government couldn't take him down. His heart gave out before the law ever could. His wife, Mame Hatcher, whom he married in 1948, lived until 2009, over 4 decades after his death, and wrote a book called Harlem Godfather, The Rap on My Husband, which became the inspiration for the series Godfather of Harlem. She made sure the world knew the real Bumpy, not just the legend. And the legend? It only grew. He was portrayed in films like Shaft, The Cotton Club, Hoodlum, and American Gangster. Forrest Whitaker brought him to life on television. Rappers like Prodigy and Central C named music after him. Bumpy Johnson became immortal. So what did the Mafia never want you to know about Bumpy Johnson? That a black man from Charleston, South Carolina, a poet, a chess player, a man who grew up terrified of lynch mobs, walked into their world and refused to kneel. He didn't just survive the Mafia. He forced them to make room for him. He played their game better than they did, and he died on his own terms, in his own neighborhood, surrounded by his own people. That's not just a gangster story. That's the story of a man who beat the most powerful criminal organization in history at their own game. and they never got over it. If this blew your mind, hit that subscribe button right now, because there are more secrets from the underworld that the history books tried to bury, and we're just getting started. Drop a comment and tell me, did the Mafia respect Bumpy Johnson, or were they just afraid of what he knew? I'll see you in the next one.